guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Ushakov with its new F key. There's been a few changes to these combat instructions. We've already taken a look at the Hannover and the Satsuma. Ushakov also got the same change, meaning you have to hit your target now to actually get progress towards this incredible combat instruction. With the Ushakov here, of course, we have 30% better dispersion and 10% more range. So a really powerful combat instruction. But now that we have to hit our target to gain any progress, maybe we won't be actually activating it all that often. But that is not the case. There's been a nice change to add on to this F key, allowing you to charge it by 0.1%, so a very tiny amount, for every 2,000 potential damage received. And what this works out to is a very consistent experience with the Ushakov and charging this F key. If you remember from the Satsuma video, I was a little bit critical, or I found it difficult to charge the F key. I found it to be a nerf to the Satsuma. Probably deserved, considering how powerful that one was. I never found Ushakov to be on that level of Satsuma as far as super battleships go. You gain armor and you gain a lot of HP over the Kremlin, but firepower-wise, you are the same ship. It's the same guns, the same AP, the same level of dispersion as well. Where this F key was your real big boost to your firepower output. And now it's more consistent to charge. I also like that you're only rewarded for actually hitting your target. When it comes to an arcade game like this, I think that's important to say that it is an arcade game. I think we should be rewarded for actually hitting our target and maybe not rewarded for missing. I really like that change still. And with Ushakov now, we have this consistency where even if I miss, like I missed on that gearing there, I would already be decaying if I was playing Satsuma. But those torpedoes that just passed our ship gave us 0.1% potential damage, or a couple ticks of it. Not enough to charge it up fully, but enough to negate the timer for the decay on these combat instructions. And now that we hit the Zao, we get our combat instructions. Where Satsuma, I think, would have lost it there. I really do think so. So really nice change here. Ushakov feels like it has a tangible benefit now over Kremlin, much more so than it used to as far as the firepower goes. You're going to have more of these F key salvos, which are frankly incredible. 30% dispersion is crazy powerful. Poor Zao here is actually going to get away. I miss aim slightly, don't quite lead enough. I was a little worried about hitting the island there. So he does manage to get away, but just an incredible showcase of what this ship can do. Yes, you have some poor dispersion, especially at longer ranges. You have the funny Russian battleship dispersion table, where you're one of the most accurate battleships at close range, and then outside of 12 to 14 kilometers, you become one of the least accurate. With these combat instructions, though, yeah, the 30% is more than enough to overcome that. So really nice, very useful for when people go broadside, make mistakes at longer ranges. You're able to punish it more effectively. Ushakov is a proper super battleship. It is incredibly powerful. Whether or not it's tier 11 or tier 12 caliber, I'm not sure exactly if it gets to that level like Satsuma might. We don't have the overmatch here. 457s do overmatch through 30. But at super battleships tier, we're looking for 32 millimeters of overmatch. That's kind of the key here. So we're still very good against these cruisers, but into battleships, it can be a little bit trickier. But fortunately, we get more of these combat instructions. It's really difficult to actually lose these combat instructions if you're playing Ushakov any sort of aggressively at all. If you're getting shot at even a little bit, it's going to be very challenging to actually lose progress towards this F key, which I really like. I think that's really cool that Wargaming is going to reward you for tanking in the tankiest ship in the game. I think that's a really nice synergy and makes for more interesting gameplay here, and hopefully leads to more Ushakovs playing a little bit more aggressively. Maybe we can have a little bit more close range gameplay. I would love to see that. Whether or not that pans out, I'm not sure. Probably not. But I would like to see it. And I do like that this ship is now rewarded. And again, we charged up another F key just like that. Even with not having the best salvos, let's be honest, we still were able to charge it up. Even if we were missing a couple times, or crucially, if you don't have spotting. That can be a little bit annoying when you don't have spotting. And yes, I know, Battleship player playing far back, complaining he doesn't have spotting. I'm aware of the irony there, but still, it is a little bit annoying with these combat instructions, and I found that especially while playing the Satsuma. Whereas with Ushakov, even if I get shot at a little bit from people behind islands, people who are dark, people in smoke, I'm not too worried about it because I still maintain my progress on this F key. So really nice change for Ushakov. Bit of a nerf to Satsuma, I think, these updated combat instructions. For Hannover, definitely a buff as well, considering the close range nature of that ship and how quickly you can farm it up again with your secondaries. And for Ushakov, I also see this as a bit of a buff. Not only does it result in charging this F key more often or more consistently, it means that the main source of your consistent firepower, this F key, is acquired much more often. And I really, really like that. Ushakov, of course, does allow you to play rather terribly, as I will demonstrate here. Perhaps one of my worst games as far as positioning my battleship. We're about to ground flat broadside. Yeah, my head really wasn't in the game in this match, and yet I'm still gonna have a good result. That's kind of the thing about Ushakov. You have so much broadside armor that even in Ohio can't get citadels on us at these ranges. It's like the Libertad. You've probably felt that already. How come I can't citadel this broadside battleship? Except even more extreme. It's that angled citadel plating. Yes, it's above water, but it's so well angled and so well armored that you just can't get through it at these mid ranges. So for Ushakov, yes, I'm playing it poorly, and yet it doesn't matter, which is, I suppose, it's super battleship strength in this case. So we're going to have a decent time farming up these combat instructions. Not playing well, but still farming them up. So Ushakov, relatively easy to play in that case, I suppose. It's going to be tricky to actually die in this ship as well. Although you do have to worry about some HE salvos coming in. This ship does have the downside of being a standard Russian battleship, so it's not a premium, where the standard Russian battleships have some of the lowest AA mount and secondary mount HP. Meaning in those carrier games, you got to be careful about doing that pushing tanking role, because a few HE salvos will just remove all the AA mounts off your ship, and you become very vulnerable to carriers. Ushakov certainly struggles with this. You gotta be a little careful. In matches like this, though, yes, you definitely can tank, even more than I'm showing in these games. Kremlin guns, however, are not enough to get through that broadside main, even at those longer ranges. Here we also see a good example, maybe not of us pushing spawn, but the enemy team pushing our spawn and what happens. Even though the Castilla and Wisconsin are pushed into relatively open water engagements, they now gain the support of all of us over here on the A cap. It's really important to know that if you're playing at higher tier, even at mid tier, you just shouldn't push enemy spawns. You open yourself up to so many crossfires, and while you're focused on trying to finish off those last remaining ships on that flank, you can get really, really exposed tunnel visioning on those guys to the crossfires. So very, very critical there. Not of the players, but just of that play style. And one of the main reasons you don't see me pushing spawn all that often. And when I do, it's often a mistake still, even when I do it. It's much more beneficial to just come back and focus on reinforcing the other flank, perhaps. We greedily try for the Napoli there and miss our F key. But I wanted to include this as well, where even if we miss our F key and at these longer ranges, we can still roll some pretty insane salvos. So we get a citadel there on that Iowa, even at 16 kilometers. Yes, the dispersion is not great, but they're still very powerful guns. As even though they're not Satsuma guns, they're still very, very strong guns, and you do have to respect them here. Poor Iowa, of course, tier 9 into a super ship game, always going to be a struggle. And here on 16.5 kilometers, without our F key, we're going to get some pretty good dispersion into him here. And I believe that one was, yeah, triple citadel. I figured that was the one. Triple citadel into an Iowa there. Waterline citadel, so it's not even like an above water, very exposed citadel there. Very accurate salvo out of the Ushakov. You can just, with Battleship RNG, sometimes roll a 0 and just get no damage, or even when you're not supposed to, on paper, still get an amazing salvo like that one into the poor Iowa. We finish off the Ohio as well, up to 176,000, even well, maybe not playing my best, still having a solid match. Over or close to 60k spotting in this one as well. Missouri shoots at us and maintaining that F key. Again, not losing our F key, even though there was some downtime in between our salvos. Really, really convenient that. Missouri is going to kite, understandably, and that's going to be pretty much the end of this match. I have one more to show you, though, where at closer ranges, we're going to just tank so much damage. Missouri at long range, perhaps the first time I've used this F key, not for better dispersion at these mid-ranges, but instead for its 10% range boost. Of course, no spotter plane on these Russian battleships, so that small range buff can be useful, and perhaps the most overkill dispersion salvo for 183 damage. So we will secure ourselves that Missouri kill, and we're on 4. So now almost 200,000 damage, 60k spotting, and 4 kills. Can we finish off this Patrie yet? And I think we might. I think we just might. Ushakov's a very, very powerful super battleship. Maybe not the most powerful. I think the Satsuma takes that crown. Maybe even Maine as well. Haven't played that one recently. That one hasn't had any changes with its F key though, so haven't really been needing to cover it. But these changes here really did, I think, nerf Satsuma slightly, although that one is still very, very powerful. But nice, I think, buffs to Ushakov and Hannover. Whether or not super battleships needed a buff, I'm not sure, but certainly it's nicer to play the Ushakov and the Hannover now, especially that we can gain these combat instructions much more consistently. And at closer ranges too. You're incentivized to play Ushakov closer and perhaps around some more island cover, because pushing open water into an enemy team is always going to lead to your downfall, even in a ship as tanky as this one. So we want to isolate 1v1s as always. We're looking for opportunities to push while not exposing ourselves to multiple flanks. And with that comes the problem of charging these combat instructions. And one of the reasons that it felt difficult to charge Ushakov's combat instructions is if you're using islands a little bit more, like I will be in this match, you maybe found yourself not able to shoot at that many targets, or the people on your flank weren't always spotted to fire at, and you'd lose your combat instructions. But now, if you're spotted and getting shot at, again, you just keep that F key charge. I really, really did enjoy this change to Ushakov. I found it much more convenient. And so in cases like this, where maybe there was a bit more downtime at the beginning of this game, or we're behind islands, yes, we've charged the F key now, we're still able to maintain it much more often. So I really, really do like it. In this case, though, Iwami, Njord, pushing away from this flank. The enemy has a lot of destroyers towards the A-cap. So instead of pushing spawn, we're going to go try and reinforce that flank. Broadside Iwami, broadside Njord, really want to punish those. But I was a little bit cautious about using my F key there on the Iwami. I wasn't sure if he was going to turn away, slow down and turn away, as we do need broadside salvos to really get the maximum damage out of these 457s, since these battleships can auto-bounce us if they do decide to angle. And also I'm looking at this Slava, because it's always fun to nuke a Slava, right? We might be a little too broadside, but notice his dispersion, pretty incredible. That's the Slava gimmick. But look at our dispersion in return. Yeah, this F key is pretty nice, man. 60,000 damage. A little bit of rounding, but 60,000 damage. We will gladly take that into a Slava. Maybe that's the special sauce with Ushakov here. Every once in a while, you get yourself a Slava level dispersion salvo out of a ship that has the tanking ability, or more than the tanking ability, of the Kremlin. Really interesting concept there. If you're interested at all in these Russian battleships, I do think going for Ushakov is a lot of fun. It is very unique to have that level of dispersion on such a tanky close-range ship. Satsuma doesn't want to get this close just because of its cheek citadel, of course, one of the worst hulls in the game, being the Yamato hull for battleships. At close range, you just eat so much damage to battleships through that cheek citadel. And of course, with its low armor values for its upper belt and bow and stern armor, A lot of smaller caliber HE, as well as small caliber AP especially, can do a ton of damage to you at closer ranges. So Satsuma, very incentivized to play a little further back. But to have this combat instruction, this level of dispersion buffing ability at close range is a lot of fun. And as for Hannover pushing in, getting close, well, it's got that superstructure, where Ushakov has a larger superstructure too, but it's very narrow. And given the other armor on this ship, it does a much better job tanking than a Hannover, at least in my opinion. Broadside main at 17 still don't quite have the pen to get through him at these ranges. I really enjoyed playing Satsuma and finding those citadels on broadside mains at longer ranges. Ushakov can't quite get through. Now we're in a bit of a tough situation here as we don't have a Hydro. That's the one other problem about pushing in. So no Hydro means a Shima popping up on our flank like that is a little bit scary. I'm gonna have to worry about going either broadside to Shima Torps at close range, which of course he torped us, or maybe risking the broadside salvo to the main, well, now dead Slava. Very fortunate for us that he got finished off, and the Njord. But Njord only has Tirpitz guns. They're a little more accurate, but Tirpitz guns shouldn't be too big of a deal, even at these ranges. No Citadel, still 14k, but that is that Citadel angling benefit. We're going to use the lock-on to Njord to get a more accurate salvo into that very low health Fletcher, and fortunately finish him off. Shima will stay in his smoke, but that smoke will be running out rather soon, so we're going to ask our carrier to come over and spot for us. And we make the mistake of going broadside to the main, but the other benefit of these Russian battleships is the absurd acceleration that these things have, especially with propulsion mod, which is what I'm likely going to be running on this ship most of the time. Gives you just absurd ability at low speeds to change your positioning. So we fortunately dodge that main salvo. I greedily use my F key. Maybe not greedily, actually. The opposite. I don't save it for a broadside main and instead use it on the destroyer. Maybe that wasn't greed. Maybe that was a smart play, getting us more damage and hopefully finishing off this destroyer. But look at how fast we accelerate from going from reverse back into forwards gear, and hopefully allowing us to avoid some incoming torpedoes here. But we're gonna still eat 3 of them. Fortunately, 142,000 HP means even Shima Torps don't feel that bad. It still hurts, but this level of HP means even those monstrous Torps don't finish us off in this case. And we get that Shimakaze down. Now a Njord pushing us, now a main pushing us, tanking for the team. We nearly have 3 million potential damage in this one. And that's the benefit. When you time your push correctly, you can take a lot of focus fire. You'll still die rather quickly early game when everybody can focus you, but these mid to late game pushes, when you time it correctly, it's so difficult to deal with an Ushakov, and that's the other power of this ship. Now, we do avoid most of Njord Torps, but he's got more for us. So we're going to have to aim low for his bow citadel. We can get through it once he angles to us enough, or doesn't angle to us enough. And I'm using zoomed in by 1 tick to make sure my guns can depress down low enough. If I had fully zoomed in, there's a bit of a soft limiter there where you can't aim low enough. So if you go back to your main turret view and just zoom in by 1 tick into the binocular view, that gets you the lowest elevation down and allows us to get that citadel up. I believe that trick still works. I haven't actually looked into it too much, but there it allowed me to get a little bit lower. I don't think the full zoom would have changed too much in that case, but it might have. So I'll share that little tip with you guys as well as we finish off the gameplay here. And honestly, I wasn't even intending to go over this, but I'm curious now. How low can we go? Okay, they've changed it, I think. Yeah, they've changed it. Okay. Good to know. You used to be limited, actually, at full binocular view at how low you could pull your guns down, but they've changed that. This was a long time ago, though, so good to see that change, actually. That makes it much more consistent to actually use your guns. I suppose with this view, you can get even lower, but I don't think your guns will actually shoot that low. Yeah, see, they go out to here still. So it's still limiting you to about there. Oh, interesting. They actually go lower. Okay, well, we're learning things. You can actually aim lower than your guns will actually shoot. Interesting. Okay, well, I would probably want that changed back up then. It used to be that you would be limited to like a kilometer at full binocular view or something like that. And then if you zoomed out to this one, you could get even lower, but to a minimum of your minimum depression range. It would get you the full gun depression. Here, though, it looks like it goes a little too far even. So that's kind of interesting. But back to port, let's talk about this build here. Full tank build like this one, I did get value out of all this extra healing, since this ship only gets up to 4 heals, even taking emergency repair expert. So getting to 5 heals on 2 million potential damage, not too difficult to do in the tankiest ship in the entire game, to be honest. So well worth taking both of these, I think. If you wanted to, which I don't necessarily recommend, but if you wanted to, you could swap Conceal out for super heavy AP shells if you wanted to greed a little more damage out of these main guns, since again, it is Kremlin guns. So 14,500 alpha damage, the same overmatch, the same pen, the same accuracy. So it might be nice to get that buff, but now that we have this new F key here, or at least the way you charge this F key, I really like it. You get it more consistently. You don't lose progress nearly as often, so it feels like much more of a gunnery buff over Kremlin just because this F key is more consistently attained than it used to be. Previously, it felt like you didn't always gain this F key, so then at that point, you're just playing a Kremlin with more HP, which is still a bonus, but maybe not the same bonus as something like a Satsuma over something like a Yamato at tier 10. This was the upgrades that I was using. You can go damage control system, but I think between these fast damage control teams and the bonus you gain here with that low speed maneuverability forwards and backwards, letting you just speed juke a little bit, gaining you a lot of tankiness in that way, making it harder to hit your vulnerable superstructure, is more than enough to make up for the 15% extra fire duration. So I like this one a lot better. Otherwise, yeah, definitely reload, definitely accuracy. That stuff is pretty standard. As for this armor layout, yes, you can see that angle right there. Maybe not quite as angled as Libertad, but still very, very well angled, and you can just see the armor plating is just so extreme here. 450 up front and in the back over the turrets, and 425 here when it comes to the center of the ship. So if you're trying to Citadel this thing, you got to aim center. Same on Kremlin. It's a little bit less armor there. It's still very difficult to get through, so keep in mind you got a bit of spaced armor as well for this thing. That is very challenging to get through it itself. 70 millimeters. So we get a bit of that black hole spaced armor in here to deal with. Right, this gap here can just gobble up shells and they just disappear. So that's where you're getting shatters, even though you get through, seemingly. Very difficult ship to kill, the Ushakov. And now with this new F key, more incentivized to tank and push in, which I like. And while you're playing it, it feels like you get that buff, that F key, much more often, much more consistently, which I think is really nice for this ship. So thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.